The Women's Prize has just announced their long list. Well, about 12 hours ago anyway. Anyway, Nell is behind the camera.
Hi.
She's going to read out the 16 books longlisted. I have no idea what they are. I'm going to give you a genuine reaction to those books. Then I'm going to go away. I'm going to do a bit of research and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about those books because I don't know what they are yet. So maybe I don't know any of them. Who knows? Let's find out. Do you have the list now?
I do.
Okay.
Ready?
Let's go. First book.
Hangman by Maiden.
Oh no, I did not like that book. I DNF'd it. That was one of my worst books last year.
Oh.
Yeah, worst books of the year video. I'm sorry.
In Defense of the Act by Effie Black.
I've never heard of this one, so we'll learn about that one later in the video.
And Then She Fell, Alicia Elliott.
I just read this as part of my reading 30 books by 30 booktubers. This is an excellent book. This is one of the few magical realism books that I have really loved. So that, I think if you watch enough of this channel, you know Scott liking a magical realism book is like fighting a hen with teeth.
I'm pretty sure you like this one. The Wren.
By Anne Enright. I did not predict it and I really felt stupid. Anne Enright is awesome.
The Maiden by Kate Foster.
Okay. I haven't read that one.
Brotherless Night by V.V. Ganeshanathan.
I've not heard of that, but that sounds like potentially an Indian or Sri Lankan author for somewhere around there, maybe? Sri Lanka?
Setting? I'm not sure about the author.
Sri Lankan setting. It's nice to see something from Central Asia, from that region. They're so rich with their literature. I'm happy to see something, and I'm excited for a book I've not heard of from there.
Restless Dolly Mortar by Kate Grenville.
Oh, an Australian author. That's awesome. It's nice to see an Australian author there, even if I have never read them before.
Enter Ghost by Isabella Hammond.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm very happy to see that book. I'm happy that the Women's Prize didn't wimp out about the Palestine thing and went serious on it.
Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy.
That's another good one. 2 5-star reads in a row. 3 books I've already read, all 5-star reads.
Of a Century-Old Trickster.
Good name for a book, never heard of it.
By Mireille Lee.
Yep, don't know that one. Don't know anything about her. Good name for a book, though.
The Blue Beautiful World by Karen Lord.
Okay, that's another good name for a book, but I don't know that book.
Western Lane
by Chetna Maru. The Booker Prize, darling, comes on.
Night Bloom.
By Peace Adozo Mendy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got one right.
Oh, you predicted.
I love that. That is the 4th 5-star book that I have read.
Wow. A good list so far.
It's a good list. I'm hoping that there's more than 4 5-star reads in this long list for me because I've already read 4.
Ordinary Human Failings.
There is more 4. There's 5 4-star. There's 5 5-star reads that I've already read. That is an excellent book, Ordinary Human Failings. If you like dark, true crime, but not quite, yeah.
River East, River West by Orbe Ray Lescure.
This is a recent reads for me, and I did not think it was quite good enough.
A Trace of Sun.
Don't know that book. That is the end of the long list. Well, I have to say, my first thoughts, 5 books that I've read and given 5 stars to. That's beautiful. What a list. There is obviously a couple of books that didn't work for me. There will always be a couple of books that didn't work for me. And there's a whole lot of books that I have never even heard of. So that is super exciting. I'll be back with a bit more detail on the remaining books. I know it's just a second for you, but it's been several hours for me. So just to summarise, 7 books I've read, 1 book I've DNF'd, and of the 7 I've finished, 5 5-star reads, 1 book I liked, 1 book I thought was pretty average. And of the 8 books I don't know about, well, that's just 8 books to discover. So overall, I'm pretty delighted with this long list. Let's go through all the titles in a little bit more detail so you can figure out what you want to read. Hangman by Maya Binyams. As I said, I tried this book. I DNF'd it. I really didn't like it. I found it very pretentious. But I have decided I will give it another chance. I make snap choices to DNF books all the time. I don't always get it right. So with so many books I already loved on this year's long list, I think it's fair to give this book the benefit of the doubt and try it again. This is about a man who is returning to Africa 28 years after he was exiled to America. Hangman is a tragic comedy Germany through homecoming and loss. It is a hilarious and twisted odyssey, peopled by phantoms and tricksters, aid workers and taxi drivers, and the relatives and ridicules that lead this man along a circuitous path towards the truth. This is the strangely honest story of one man's search for refuge in this world and the one that lies beyond it. I'm not going to pretend I'm excited about this one, and rereading the old description makes me even less excited, but I do hope that rereading this proves me very wrong. In Defense of the Act by Effie Black. I knew absolutely nothing about this book or this author. This is a debut novel. It was released on the 13th of July, and just to put into perspective how underground this novel is, it only has 42 ratings on Goodreads, but it does have a 4.43 average rating, which is spectacular. Effie Black is queer, based in London, and she is coming to books from a science background. Effie, if you're watching, all the best people do. This was published by Epicue Press. They're a tiny press with only 12 authors listed as their published authors. Seek the Singing Fish by Roma Wells and What Willow Says by Lynn Buckle are probably the most famous titles they have published, which I think shows just how small they are. So delighted to see such a small press on this long list, and queer literature represented on this long list too. Are we more like coffee beans, a carrot, or an egg? What happens to us when we are boiled in the trials and tribulations of life? Jessica Miller is fascinated by the somewhat perplexing tendency of humans to end their own lives, but she secretly believes such acts may not be that bad after all, or at least she did. Jessica is coming to terms with her own relationships and reflecting on what it means to be queer when a single event throws everything she once believed into doubt. Can she still defend the act? And not gonna lie, there's some pretty weird questions she asked at the start of that blurb. But we are definitely more like eggs than carrots. And if humans were remotely like coffee, I would be more social and less misanthropic. A book about humans ending their own lives is such an important and a divisive theme. I always like literature that is helping readers empathize with some of the choices and situations we have, and to just put a little bit more perspective and thought into that than we often have time to do. This description sounds very promising for this book. And Then She Fell by Alicia Elliott. This is Indigenous literature blending motherhood, mental health struggles with racism, a time-travelling cockroach, and a talking Pocahontas. It's about Alice, who is a new mother and is lacking in sleep. She has not felt that bond with her new child, Dawn. She moves away from her family support unit too, and has to deal with the microaggressions from her new neighbours. Normally, I hate magical realism, but as a way of expressing mental illness and spiritual belief, it's actually quite effective. And I think this novel is really wonderful, and I'm excited that more people will get a chance to read this. The Wren by Anne Enright. Easily the biggest stuff up in my prediction video was not including this book. I was thinking, nah, this is not really a woman's prize book. Then when I watched Alice's prediction video where she pointed out just how often Enright gets listed, well, I knew I was wrong then. It's about intergenerational trauma, legacy, family history. It's about a mother-daughter relationship where the daughter, in this book Nell, is in her early 20s and forging her future, her life, and leaving home. While for Carmel, Nell's departure opens space in her life, which is the room she needs to process the trauma from her past. Carmel's father was a famous poet and not the best father. I love that Enright doesn't go all in on how horrible her father is. Trauma doesn't have to come from the most extreme acts. What Carmel's father does in this book, it's textbook trauma for children stuff. Wonderfully poetic in its writing, and this is a potential winner right here. I reckon this is probably the early favourite for the title. The Maiden by Claire Foster. Edinburgh, October 1679. Christiane Nemo is arrested and charged with the murder of her lover, James Forrester. News of her imprisonment and subsequent trial is splashed across the broadside with headlines that leave little room for doubt. Adulteress, whore, murderess. Only a year before, Lady Christian was leading a life of privilege and respectability. So what led her to risk everything for an affair? And does that make her guilty of murder? She wasn't the only woman in Forrester's life, and certainly not the only one who might have had cause to wish him dead. Feminist historical fiction. It does look really commercial, but it is hard to tell for sure, especially as it's a debut novel. But I'm looking forward to reading this one. I might save it for when I want something a little lighter though. Brotherless Night by VV. I wish I had have googled how to pronounce that name before I started filming. This is her second novel, but 15 years were between this one and her last one. In this searing novel, a courageous young woman tries to protect her dreams of becoming a doctor as civil war devastates Sri Lanka. Jaffna, 1981, 16-year-old Sashi wants to become a doctor, but over the next decade, a vicious civil war tears through her home, and her dreams spin off course as she sees her four beloved brothers and their friend Kay swept up in the mounting violence. Desperate to act, Sashi accepts Kay's invitation to work as a medic at a field hospital for the militant Tamil Tigers, who following years of state discrimination and violence are fighting for a separate homelands for Sri Lankan's Tamil minority. But after the Tigers murder one of her teachers and Indian peacekeepers arrive only to commit further atrocities, Sashi begins to question where she stands. When one of her medical school professors, a Tamil feminist and dissident, invites her to join a secret project documenting human rights violations, she embarks on a dangerous path that will change her forever. Set during the early years of Sri Lanka's 3-decade-long civil war, Brotherless Night is a heart-rending portrait of a woman's moral journey and a testament to both the enduring impact of war and the bonds of home. And when she's following her four brothers into a war zone and it's called Brotherless Night, it's got a pretty dark omen, doesn't it? Surely I don't need to sell this book to you. Surely the description is doing that work for me. I am very much looking forward to reading this one. Restless, Dolly, Mortar by Kate Grenville. At long last, we get another Aussie on the long list. It's been a few years. Grenville is an Aussie writing machine in her 70s and still producing books. It's lovely to see her get some recognition. Dolly Mortar was born at the end of the 19th century when society's long-locked doors were starting to crack ajar for women. Growing up in a poor farming family in country New South Wales, but clever, energetic and determined, Dolly spent the rest of her life pushing at those doors. Most women like her have disappeared from views, remembered only in family photos, albums as remote figures in impossible clothes, or maybe for a lemon pudding recipe handed down throughout the generations. Restless, Dolly Mortar brings one of these women to life as somebody we can recognise and whose struggles we can empathise with. Kate Grenville uses family memories to imagine her way through the life of her grandmother. This is a story of a woman working her way through a world of limits and obstacles, who was able, if at a cost, to make a life she could call her own. Her battles and triumphs helped to open doors for the women who came after. This is clearly very feminist, but it doesn't sound like the most interesting of books. But I guess that's what these prizes are for, to get us to look twice at books we maybe would have overlooked and ignored, because this definitely sounds like it could be wonderful. It also sounds like it's on the cusp of fiction and non-fiction, and we had a very similar book last year. Quite an interesting pick for this year's Women's Prize, and one that I'm feeling hopeful about. Enter Ghost by Isabella Hamad. Not just a 5-star read for me, but one of my books of last year. This is a special novel, and I'm delighted to see it longlisted. And now that it's longlisted, I think it could go a long way in this competition. It's about a woman in her late 30s, an actor who is returning from London to her childhood home on the West Bank to live with her sister for a short stay after separating from her husband. She meets a theatre group who want to perform Hamlet in Arabic and agrees to play Gertrude. And if you're Sigmund Freud, that would be Hamlet's love interest. It is really two brilliant stories in one. A woman observing the treatment of Palestine by Israeli soldiers, the everyday terror, the defiance of putting on a play in Arabic rather than Hebrew. It's also about a woman moving on with her life after a breakup, picking up the pieces. And I love the way that Hammond blends these stories too. Because if you're a sadist, I mean an abridger, and you don't want one of these stories in your abridged novel, there wouldn't be a lot for you to cut out. So much of this book is filled with dual meaning and dual roles. I think this will be very popular. Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy, another 5-star read for me. A very simple but complex book about a mother's love for her young son as her marriage is placed under increasing pressure. It explores motherhood, hope for the future, mental health, gender roles, the importance of friendship. It is written in a stream of consciousness style that is poetic and beautifully written and actually works really well. I know stream of consciousness is normally terrible, but that's because it's a very hard skill to master, and it's something that Kilroy has gotten spot on. If you like emotions in your novel, you'll like this book. Delighted to see it get some praise at prize time as well. 8 Lives of a Century-Old Trickster by Mirani Lee. Heartbreaking, Monica Ali. Maybe if anybody had have heard of this novel beforehand, we could have predicted this would be longlisted, Ali being the head judge this year. A debut novel from a Korean author writing in English, and it is already been compared to Pachinko. Joining the acclaimed ranks of Pachinko and A Woman Is No Man, a riveting genre-bending debut of love and survival set in the demilitarized zone separating North and South Korea. Life near the North Korean border is a zero-sum game, an ongoing battle in which you either win or lose. This dangerous, shadowed netherworld is home to an unforgettable woman known only as the Trickster. Inspired by a story of Lee's great auntie, one of the oldest women to escape from North Korea, 8 Lives of a Century-Old Trickster consists of 8 dark and spellbinding chapters that follow this remarkable character and her family as they struggle to survive during the most turbulent times of modern Korean history. Mirani Lee's Trickster is a shapeshifter throughout the course of these interconnected chapters. She is a slave, an escape artist, a murderer, a terrorist, a spy, a lover, and a mother. A woman who must often choose the unthinkable to survive war and conquest in Korea. Her story is a beguiling, complex tale of love and survival that will keep you riveted and speculating until the very end, thanks to Lee's brilliant talent for sleight of hand. A fascinating look at survival, trauma, and family. 8 Lives of a Century-Old Trickster is an incredible literary debut from a bright new talent. Another book with a description that doesn't really need me to sell it to you. That sounds brilliant. The Blue Beautiful World by Karen Lord. As First Contact transforms the Earth, a group of gifted visionaries race to create a new future in this wondrous science fiction novel from the award-winning author of The Best of All Possible Worlds. The world is changing, and humanity must change with it. Rising seas and soaring temperatures have radically transformed the face of the Earth. Meanwhile, Earth is being observed from afar by other civilizations, and now they are ready to make contact. Vying to prepare humanity for its first contacts are a group of dreamers and changemakers, including Peter Hendricks, the genius inventor behind the most advanced VR technology, Carissa, a beloved celebrity icon with a passion for humanitarian works, and Keona, a member of a council of young people from around the globe drafted to reimagine the relationships between humankind and alien society. And they may have an unexpected secret weapon, Owen, a pop megastar whose ability to connect with his adoring fans is more than charisma. He has a hidden talent that may be the key to uniting Earth as it looks towards the stars. But Owen's abilities are so unique that no one can control him, and so seductive that he cannot help but use them. Can he transcend his human limitations and find the freedom he has always dreamed of, or is he doomed to become the dictator of his nightmares? That sounds like a novel that somebody is definitely going to love, but I'm not sure I'm that somebody. I am going to read the Longlist. I am going to give this a try, and hopefully I will like it significantly more than I like the description. This doesn't sound like it fits in with the rest of the books, I have to say. Western Lane by Chetna Maru, shortlisted for the Booker Prize and now longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. This book is getting some love. A book about squash, grief, parenthood, friendship, family, and growing up. 11-year-old Gopi's mother has recently died. Her father is struggling to cope. Her sisters are helping run the house, and she is trying to win a squash tournament. Just a really emotional and simple novel. Look, I like this book. I really did like this book, but I don't get the hype around it. It's just a good book. It's not an amazing book. I'm delighted that other people are enjoying it and getting a lot out of it. It's got Claire Keegan sort of qualities to it. Night Bloom by Peace Adzomedi. I have loved both of Peace Adzomedi's novels thus far, and I am delighted to see her longlisted for the Woman's Prize. This is a really intelligent and well-constructed novel. It is about two cousins who were very good friends as children, but who grew apart. Broken into 3 parts. In part 1, we follow one of the girls from childhood to adult. Part 2, we follow the other, and while there are several events that are relevant to just one character, we see multiple events in part 1 repeated in part 2. However, every time that happens, we learn something new about them. We see them from a different point of view. Then the plot, themes, and characters explode in the 3rd part, which is just such an entertaining read. Good books, I always think, are like dominoes. Once they're all set up, the author just really has to knock one down, and the pieces, they collapse to create this beautiful, breathtaking pattern. And this book is definitely a book like that. I love to see a bit of quality African literature getting some love from this prize as well. Ordinary Human Failings by Megan Noland. Only 3 Irish authors. Considering recent trends and other prizes, that's a bit pathetic, Ireland. Come on, pull your socks up. But I could see all 3 of these Irish novels winning depending on what the judges are looking for. This is a book about the murder of a 3-year-old girl, potentially by a 7-year-old girl, the family she comes from, the journalist covering the event, the public reaction to it, the teacher who used to teach the 7-year-old, the police who are questioning her, the grandmother who is no longer with us, the alcoholic uncle who was meant to be looking after her, the damaged mother, and of course, the 7-year-old murderess. This is a novel about perceptions and judgment. It is correct to call this a true crime novel, but it really isn't for true crime readers. Devastating, socially critical, and just brilliant. River East, River West by Aubrey Ray Lescure. This is about 14-year-old Elva, who was raised by a white mother in China. She is half Chinese and half American herself, but she has never been to America. She doesn't know who her father is, and then suddenly her mother is getting married to their landlord, Lu Fang. 22 years earlier, we follow Lu Fang as he falls in love with a blonde-haired American woman. I do like the white immigrants in China angle instead of the Chinese immigrants in the US or some other country angle. I personally thought this book was a bit slow, however. I had trouble investing in the characters. I normally hate the criticism that all the problems in this novel could be solved if the characters had a conversation, as if that isn't true for all the problems and fights in the real world as well. However, in this case, I thought it seemed unrealistic to the relationship between the characters that they didn't communicate, and I was not left particularly liking the mother or the daughter at the center of this novel. Other people will like this book, so don't be put off by my poor review of it. especially if it sounds like a book that you might like. It's certainly not devoid of merit. I will watch what this author does in the future, but I do maybe think that there were a few better novels that could have been longlisted. A Trace of Sun by Pam Williams. Don't go mammy please, stuttered words filled her ears, sent frisons of guilt through her as she bent over him, held him in her thumping chest, tears sliding from her face to his. Raf is left behind in Granada when his mother Scylla follows her husband to England in search of a better life. When they are finally reunited 7 years later, they are strangers, and the emotional impact of the separation leads to events that rip their family apart as they try to move forward with their life. His mother's secret will make Raf question all that he's ever known of who he is. A Trace of Sun is in part inspired by the author's own family experience. Well, that sounds horrible, miserable, and completely heartbreaking. I can't wait to read it. Published by Legend Press, who I have never heard of before, but have a heap of really interesting sounding novels that they publish. So I'll be going back to them and mining them for some new titles to read once my TBR is starting to feel a little skinny again. That is all 16 books. Overall, this is a brilliant long list. If half the books I have read is indicative of the other half of the long list, I will be requesting these judges judge the prize every year. There's a bunch of titles that everybody was guessing that didn't make it, but I think that's a very bad way of judging a long list. There are some really good quality titles that I know and I love, and there are also some interesting surprises that I have never heard of, and that to me is pretty close to the perfect long list. So I need to hurry up and stop filming so I can go buy the remaining books I haven't read. Now I'll be reviewing all 16 books in a video in a few weeks' time once I've finished reading them. So if you're interested in the Woman's Prize, please remember to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. And if you're not interested, I don't really know why you watched this entire video. I'll also be making videos about the Australian and North American versions of the Woman's Prize, the Stella Prize and the Carol Shields Prize. So subscribe so you don't miss them. I would like to thank my wonderful Patreons for their support. I'd also like to apologise to everybody for not replying to comments for a while. One of my family members is sick and I've started placement for my course and I'm just a little socially out of spoons. I read and appreciate every comment and I will reply to them soon, and I get a lot of joy out of creating videos. So please don't stop commenting, but please understand it might take a little bit longer for me to get back to you. I hope you all enjoy discovering the 16 books on the Woman's Prize for Fiction long list. Bye bye.